China Global Television Network.
The South African government says violence against foreigners in the country is pure criminality. The UN Secretary General heads to Egypt. We tell you what's on the agenda. And aid agencies rush to deliver relief supplies amid a rise in cholera cases in Mozambique. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Well, let's begin this broadcast in South Africa, where ongoing discussions on xenophobic attacks have been held between the country's foreign minister and ambassadors from African countries. This follows attacks against foreigners in the coastal city of Durban. The violence was sparked by the killing of 2 South Africans. Authorities in the country are now calling on ordinary South Africans to take a stand against the spate of violence leveled against foreign nationals. The country's International Relations and Cooperation Minister Lindiwe Sisulu says the recent attack on foreign nationals is pure criminality. Well, let's get more on this developing story. Angelo Coppola is following all that for us from Johannesburg. Angelo, the International Relations and Cooperation Minister says the attack on foreign nationals in South Africa is pure criminality. What is the latest on the upsurge of violence in Durban?
Well, look, at the moment, Beatrice, it's very calm there, but it's also very tense. And it could flare up at any moment. Many of the attacks, as you know, take place at night or in the early hours of the morning. And that's when the South African Police Service's presence is at its lowest. Also, the infrastructure in and around those shanty towns is almost non-existent, and criminals and gangs are using local knowledge to their advantage in this way. So we saw this modus operandi when we were covering the last spate of xenophobic attacks in Johannesburg and Durban several years ago. The police services are loath to go into those areas without armed protection, and paths are so narrow that only motorbikes can use them to go up and down, which leaves those officers exposed. There's also generally no lighting, making it even more dangerous. So the criminals use this to their advantage, and it needs just one spark, an attack on a foreign-owned spaza shop, for example, where the owner is carrying a weapon, and it's going to spiral out of control. So everyone's watching the situation overnight to make sure that they can try and keep a lid on what is now being called criminality, but which is in fact xenophobia. Beatrice?
Angelo, you have mentioned, though, that you did cover the xenophobic attacks a few years ago, so this is clearly not the first time that this is happening. What measures, though, are in place or need to be put in place to ensure there is no recurrence of xenophobic attacks in South Africa?
Well, look, on a broad level, there needs to be an increase in economic growth in the country to bring those employment levels or those levels down. We need to improve the infrastructure cities, and we need to reduce the size of towns. We're told criminally prosecute anyone who's in xenophobia, and then finally you need to be prosecuting those involved in attacking and or looting those foreign-owned businesses, or any business for that matter. And this means that the South African police services need to enforce the so-called rule of law that we all hear so much talk about. And perhaps as a longer-term project, they need a culture of tolerance towards all people instilled, regardless of where they come from. So the police services, despite the less than perfect working environment in those townships, and that's where the rule of law has to be imposed. And of course we did hear just recently that they've introduced a new national plan of action to deal with all kinds of racism, including xenophobia. So let's see how that one plays out, Beatrice.
All right, Angelo Coppola joining us there from Johannesburg with that update on the xenophobic attacks in South Africa. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres is expected in Egypt. He is set to hold discussions with President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, who assumed the position of the head of the African Union in February. Egypt is the second leg in Guterres' Middle East tour, which started in Tunisia. He will later go to Jordan, where he will speak at the World Economic Forum. While the situation in neighboring Libya may also be an issue the United Nations Secretary General may want to address, For years, many Western powers have turned their back against the Libyan Eastern government based in Tobruk city. Supported mainly by Arab powers, that government, with its Libyan National Army, now controls most of Libya. Here's Adel Mahroui with more.
Since its formation, the Libyan Eastern government didn't succeed to gain much international recognition. Libya's parliament, which is globally acknowledged, formed that Benghazi-based government, yet many Western countries have deliberately marginalized it.
The international community gave recognition to the Sikharat Agreement, therefore the Eastern Transitional Government being marginalized, simply because it is not a product of that 2015 agreement. Most countries have not been giving any considerations to the decisions of this transitional government or even Abdullah Athani, its prime minister.
Recently, though, the world is gradually changing its approach to the Eastern government. Thanks to the Libyan National Army, that government gained control over most Libyan territories, while the internationally recognized government in Tripoli continues to lack authority over most parts of the divided country. That has forced some countries to be more pragmatic.
Some European countries realized that dealing with General Khalifa Haftar directly may seem as a support for him. Instead, these countries saw that it's better to coordinate with the strongest partner, the Eastern government in security, within the framework of counter-terrorism and illegal migration.
The United Nations has scheduled a tribal conference in Libya on April 14. With the Eastern government's influence and control over most Libyan territories, this conference could reflect the magnitude of support Tripoli and Benghazi governments actually have on the ground. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Well, CGTN's Yasser Hakim is keeping tabs on that story for us. He is joining me now from Cairo. Yasser, the UN chief is expected in Egypt. Has he arrived yet? And what issues are likely to dominate the agenda?
Well, we have no news yet about his arrival, and at the moment we all know that his agenda is divided into two main meetings. The first one with the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, where they will talk on several issues such as the Palestinian question and trying to find a two-state solution and a peace process obviously based on Jerusalem as a capital of two states. And then you have the Syrian issue, especially in regards to the Golan Heights. The Arab League summit that had just ended in Tunis has denounced the US move to try to annex or recognize the Golan Heights as an Israeli entity, and the Arab leaders have denounced this and said they will go to the United Nations for a resolution on the Golan Heights, on Syria. So this will obviously be on the table of talks between the Egyptian president and the UN Secretary General. On the other hand, Guterres will be meeting with Sheikh Al-Azhar, the high scholar in Islam, and he will be talking about Islamophobia, how to combat and counter Islamophobia, and also how to counter extremism and extremist thought, and how the world can work together on combating terrorism and extremism in the region. And those will be the main issues in discussion during the UN Secretary General's meetings here in Cairo.
Well, yes, of course, the situation in Libya has been ongoing for years now. The influence of the UN-backed government appears to be on the decline in Libya. Is the UN worried by this development at all?
I think after years of mediation in Libya, the UN realizes that it's not practical taking one side or backing one side in Libya, and that they've seen how in order to achieve peace in Libya, they have to gather all the political or different factions in Libya and political parties and powers to reach a consensus. And that's why it was obvious with the increase in power of the Benghazi government of the East, of Khalifa Haftar, against Faiz al-Sarraj's government, which has not been reaching the expectations by the UN that has backed that government before. So at this point, it's not more about worrying about one side, but more about trying to get all sides to agree on a plan, on a map for peace, on elections, on a new constitution, without any form of violence or any deterrence from one side or the other. And this should be the target at the moment. We understand that there is still hope. There were statements coming out from the UN saying that the talks between the two sides in Libya, the East and the Western government, could lead to some kind of an agreement and a peace plan for transition for Libya into peace and into a democratic nation. So that remains to be seen at the moment, and whether this will succeed in the next few months.
Yasser Hakim joining us there from Cairo with that update. Thank you. Let's now head to the Horn of Africa region, where Mogadishu Mayor Abdi Rahman Osman has started a new security operation in the capital Mogadishu after a recent spike in bombings in the Somali capital. The operation will involve a search of vehicles and neighborhoods. It will also see the closure of major streets in Mogadishu. The mayor is asking residents to cooperate with security agents during the operation. The duration of these security measures has not been made clear.
We have started an operation which is being carried out by the security forces in the capital. We want the public to give a hand to the security agents during the operation. We would like you to make their work easy, as security is something that will affect us all, and we need to join our hands in keeping it. I feel there could be challenges that may arise from these security operations in situations where houses are searched. We want you to bear with us in that. As an administration, to ensure that we continue serving you, we have made buses and ambulances available for the public.
Meanwhile, the Somali government has reshuffled top military commanders in a bid to improve security in the country. General Abdi Hassan Mohammed, formerly a military attaché posted in Saudi Arabia, has been appointed the new Deputy Chief of Staff of the country's armed forces. He replaces General Odawa Yusuf Raji, who has been promoted as the new infantry commander. General Abdi Rashid Abdullahi Shire serves as his deputy. Admiral Abbas Amin has been made the new commander of the Somali Navy.
The Somali infantry forces have been created. Managing these forces used to be the responsibility of the Somali Army Chief of Staff. From today henceforth, a commander of the Somali infantry forces has been appointed. All the infantry forces and their military academies will be under his management. The military commanders will also be categorized, and all the commanders serving under the Somali infantry forces will be under the command of the infantry chief.
Egypt has announced that it is exporting 19 military armored vehicles to Burundi, a step that military experts in Cairo hailed as a new chapter in the country's industrial capabilities. Late last year, Cairo invited African military officials to attend its first defense exhibition. The event aimed to market Egyptian military products to African and Arab countries. Here's Adel Mahroui with more.
Egypt is entering a new chapter of military production. The Arab Organization for Industrialization announced an arms exportation deal with Burundi. 19 Fahd 300 armored vehicles will be produced in the first African deal announced this year.
For long, African countries have been importing from Egypt light weapons like rifles, machine guns, mortar shells and other projectiles. The significance of this agreement with Burundi is that it moves Egypt to heavy military machinery exportation, which Egypt has been giving a lot of focus in the field of military production.
Based on the designs of the German armored vehicle TH-390, Egypt developed Fahd. With its multi-purpose design, Fahd 300 can be used to transport soldiers equipped with heavy machine guns or rocket launchers.
Egypt benefited a lot from the experiences of foreign countries like China, South Korea and Pakistan. We have military cooperation with them and their joint military production programs. With France, for example, we've produced high-tech heavy machinery like the Gazelle helicopter and the Go-Wind frigates.
Egypt's first defense expo, EDEX, has opened opportunities for exportation. Besides the economical added value to the country, Egypt aims to enhance its military production capabilities and become a hub for military production and trade in Africa. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
You're watching Africa Live. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Aid agencies rush to deliver relief supplies amid a rise in cholera cases in Mozambique. And we look at how environmental degradation is causing havoc on the continent and the possible solutions.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
Who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
To our continuing coverage of the devastating aftermath of Cyclone Idai. Mozambican and international health workers are racing to contain the outbreak of cholera in the city of Beira. The cases of the disease have jumped to 517 and the first death has been recorded. Workers have restored clean tap water to parts of the city of 500,000, although large areas still do not have access to clean water. More than 2 weeks after Cyclone Idai hit Beira and swept across central Mozambique, about 98,000 people are in camps for the displaced. In addition to Mozambican medics, health workers from Portugal, Denmark, Italy and China are helping to respond to the crisis. The overall cyclone death toll in Mozambique has risen to 518, with 259 deaths in Zimbabwe and 56 in Malawi. The three-nation death toll is now more than 800. In Zimbabwe, the United Nations will this week launch a multi-million-dollar appeal to help the country's government address the humanitarian emergency. On Sunday, the organization's refugee agency donated over 80 metric tons of aid to Zimbabwe's communities affected by Cyclone Idai. Here's CGTN's Farai Mwakutuya with more details.
A timely delivery of critical supplies that will help Zimbabwe mitigate the ongoing humanitarian crisis. 80 tons of non-food aid has been flown into the country and is due to be dispatched to the Eastern Highlands, where it will assist some 10,000 people. More is on the way as the UN launches an emergency appeal for funds to avert waterborne diseases and to meet the immediate needs of those displaced by the deadly cyclone.
60 million will cover food need, medicine need, early element of recovery, shelters, some of the basic water sanitation and logistic support to reach it, as well as non-food items in terms of tents, temporary accommodation, the cooking facilities.
Zimbabwe's government has deployed its strategic grain reserves to feed survivors and has given assurances there is adequate food for all the affected. Beyond the immediate relief, Zimbabwe requires long-term financial support to recover from the worst climate-induced disaster ever seen here, the losses of which are still being counted.
We had 182 people who had died, and we had over 300 people missing. That is a tragedy. And then we're looking at the destruction of bridges, schools, churches, the loss of livestock, basically the loss of everything that people owned.
The death toll is expected to rise as more of the missing are found amongst the ruin. Sniffer dogs from neighboring South Africa, brought in to comb the ravaged terrain, have narrowed the search area to 16 sites where those who are unaccounted for and presumed dead may be lying beneath the rubble. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir has acknowledged the legitimacy of the anti-government protesters' demands. Speaking while addressing the country's parliament for the first time since the government imposed a state of emergency, President Bashir, however, condemned the destruction of property and other unlawful acts that left some people dead. Violent protests have rocked the country since December, with demonstrators calling on the veteran leader to step down.
Some didn't respect the regulations on gathering and demonstrating. They defied public order and they destroyed property.
Further afield, European Commission Chief Jean-Claude Juncker says it is time for the British Parliament to spell out what it wants on Brexit. After rejecting British Prime Minister Theresa May's divorce deal 3 times, British lawmakers will hold a series of indicative votes on Brexit alternatives on Monday in an attempt to find a solution that a majority would support. Juncker says he still hopes an agreement can be finalized between the European Union and the United Kingdom before April the 12th. Now, Cote d'Ivoire's capital, Abidjan, recently hosted the 14th edition of the African Urology Day. The forum seeks to promote healthcare of the urinary tract and also scientific exchanges in Africa. Let's take a look.
The event is held under the theme Urological Pathologies and Sexual Medicine in Africa. Over 300 urologists and surgeons from all over the continent have gathered in Abidjan. They are here to share experiences and discuss issues that include cancer, kidney transplantation, and chronic kidney failure.
Urologists in Africa in general and in the sub-region really want to work. They want to advance in their profession, but what they lack is equipment. Their hospitals are not well equipped with the latest high technology.
It is important to talk about these issues because they affect people's quality of life. So it is important that sexual medicine is no longer a taboo, as it is part of the objectives of the Ministry of Physical and Mental Health of People to solve patients' problems.
Recommendations made at the forum focused on harmonizing surgical techniques in different countries, as well as developing health infrastructure in Africa and increasing the number of accredited urology programs on the continent.
As of now, only Dakar has an accredited program in urology, cardiothoracic and vascular, neurosurgery and general surgery. We hope that many other centers will be accredited in other countries so that all the residents we train, considering our languages, can move within the ECOWAS region and beyond. We will also integrate the Portuguese speakers who are often forgotten. Senegal is the only part of Africa where Portuguese, French and English are at work simultaneously. That is why the Organization of American States uses these working languages, and we must bring our colleagues from Guinea-Bissau and Cape Verde to join us so that we can work together.
According to health specialists, prostate cancer is the leading cause of death in hospital services in Africa. The founders of the Pan-African Association of Urologic Surgeons therefore believe that work should be done to further strengthen the field of urology in the ECOWAS region. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
Traditional fishermen living along Nigeria's Lake Gerio say fish stocks in the region are rapidly getting depleted, threatening their livelihoods as the lake's waters recede. Environmentalists say siltation, human encroachment, and dumping of waste in the lake are a major cause for concern.
The livelihood of hundreds of fishermen in Damare, a village in Yola City, northeastern Nigeria, is under threat because of siltation. Over the years, silt has been building up in Lake Gerio, affecting marine life.
We're just managing now. We come to the river every day and fish. We sell the little fish we're able to catch and use the money to buy food for our families and buy soup for our children. It is also through this that we buy clothes for our family, mostly during Salah celebrations. Sometimes we make sure our families are satisfied, even if we don't buy anything for ourselves.
Why go wear clothes again? The siltation is caused by dumping of waste or soil erosion, which makes the waters in rivers and lakes recede, affecting fishing activities.
There is no fish now like before. The little we have is costly and there are just a few customers. Before now, we used to sell our fish and go home before 6 p.m. But now we stay till around 9 p.m. because there is no money and customers are not patronizing us like they used to. We are just managing the business because we don't want to be idle, but we are suffering.
Farmers used to make about $500 every month. But now, none is able to make $220 a month.
We will keep doing our best, but if we get a better job, we will definitely change profession. The truth is, even if we don't change our business, our children will not join us in this business because they are in school.
According to local authorities, it is not just fishing that has been affected. Trade and transportation between cities around the lake have also been negatively impacted as the waters are no longer navigable.
So far, nothing has been done yet. But the major solution to that problem is dredging. I know dredging will require a lot of money to carry out. So we don't know, but there is a need for dredging in order to create more avenue for water, for the river to contain more water, so that we have more water for the irrigation activities that we carry out.
Fish vendors now source the bulk of their fish from neighboring Chad and Cameroon. Many of the residents now also combine fishing with farming maize and rice in the hope that a lasting solution will be found to sustain a return to fishing on a full-time basis. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
And still on environmental matters, paper craft production is gaining popularity in Nigeria and subsequently giving a boost to conservation efforts. A young entrepreneurial artist is selling specialized handicraft decorations made out of recycled paper, which also helps to protect the environment.
They say beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, but here in Lagos, it can also be in the hands of those who hold used paper. Funmi Adubi, a self-taught artist, creates decorative items from recycled paper. She seeks to develop her passion for handmade decor as a means of artistic expression. Techniques used include folding, cutting, molding and layering to achieve the desired result.
The main story behind it is practically recycling. Instead of trashing paper, like the benefits of or the uses of paper, you can actually use old magazines and make flowers out of them. You can quill, you can frame them, you can use them to make boxes, you can use them to make decorative pieces for your homes.
The young entrepreneur also teaches interested students the craft. Funmi started pursuing this skill in 2016 after selling off her confectionery business. She uses various colors and textures and later binds them together with glue to form her decorative designs. It can take up to 15 days to make complex designs. She has over time managed to grow her pool of customers who now regularly buy her pieces.
Challenges I first encountered was actually convincing people to buy the craft. But over time, when I was consistent and I didn't stop, people understood that this is actually beautiful, and I had to post the various uses of paper flowers, not just limited to backdrops. You can actually use them to beautify your wall space in your homes, your office space, decorate your child's wall space, revamp your office, events. There are so many uses. You can use them as centerpiece for events.
The 29-year-old sells her products to event companies and individual clients while using social media to market her work.
Made for a client to decorate.
She also makes customized designs to fit different client needs.
The Nigerians are actually adapting to it. Like, whenever they see my flowers, they're like, wow, is this really paper? Can I touch it? what materials do you use, as in how did you do this? And that's why I train people too, to make them know that you can actually make something beautiful out of just papers. And yeah, for event planners, a lot of them are fascinated with the fact that you can actually use them for events. It's something new.
Prices for the designs can be from $40 and above, depending on the complexity of the design. The artist says she wants to experiment with more paper craft techniques and reach more potential clients. Dina Matengo, CGTN.
Which I made for a client.
Let's bring you news just in. Algeria's President Abdelaziz Bouteflika is to resign from office before his mandate expires on April the 28th. That's according to a state media. A statement issued from his office said the president will take steps to ensure state institutions continue to function during the transition period. Again, we are receiving news that Algeria's President Abdelaziz Bouteflika is set to resign from office before his mandate expires on April the 28th. That's according to reports from state media. A statement issued from his office said the president will take steps to ensure state institutions continue to function during the transition period. Well, let's now go to Uche Okronko for the latest business news. Uche.
Thanks, Beatrice. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. 15 Kenyan-listed companies issue profit warnings, signaling a depressed economic environment. And Zimbabwe's power utility proposes a 30% hike in tariffs.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off in Kenya, where 50 Nairobi Securities Exchange listed firms are now facing a 136.9 million dive in profits since June 2018. Now, the companies include key state enterprises. The firms have issued profit warnings indicating a fall in earnings by about 25%. They include Kenyan Power Company, Bamburi Cement, Kenyan Reinsurance Corporation, Britam, Housing Finance, National Bank, and UAP Holdings. Now, the shortfall in earnings has signaled a slowdown in investments. It also diminishes the growth in payroll and corporate tax collections by the Kenyan Revenue Authority. The Federation of Kenyan Employers has blamed the situation on a slowdown in payments, the increased levies by national and county governments, as well as high labor costs and erratic weather conditions. Well, staying in Kenya, the central bank has said that the lending rate to the private sector is under control, with an annual growth of about 3.4% in the past 12 months. Now, the rise in stocks of non-performing loans has created some concerns, as it stands at 12.8% as of February, compared to 12% in December. The country's rate cap law was introduced in September 2016, but it was struck down as unconstitutional by the court in March. Well, the legislators, banks and the Reserve Bank have been granted a 12-month window to mutually agree on a solution.
First, making sure that they are pricing credit correctly, meaning pricing credit according to the risk. So risk-based pricing of loans, which is significant. Secondly, transparency, providing information to the borrower about the potential price of products and all this other thing. Transparency is key. So customers can even do a sort of, let's say, window shopping across banks, because there is information about the loans and what the true cost of the loan will be. We just launched actually the banking charter, which requires banks to actually have thought through ways for strengthening their customer their relationship with customers. And this includes even how the dispute resolution mechanisms and other things like that.
Well, let's head to Zimbabwe now, where state-owned power utility ZESA Holdings has applied for an increase in tariffs by about 30%. Now, the utility is citing maintenance of its power grid and price hikes of diesel as a result for the increase in prices. Now, the uninterrupted power supply is critical for the country's mining sector, which of course contributes more than $2.5 billion to the country's revenue. According to ZESA, 1,604 megawatts was being produced at its coal-fired and hydro plants against the peak demand of 2,000 megawatts. ZESA's application for a review of tariffs comes after the energy regulator rejected the 49% rise in 2016. Now, the regulator was concerned by potential impact on the struggling economy. Zimbabwe recently scrapped off its 1-to-1 official peg to the US dollar. It merged its bond notes and electronic dollars into a transitional currency called the RTGS dollar. Now, on the international stage, the world's top oil producer, Saudi Aramco, has received A+ and A1 credit ratings from Fitch and Moody's, respectively. This comes ahead of the state's oil giant's first global bond sale and its 2018 earnings of $111.1 billion. That's after interest, tax, and depreciation. Officials of the state-owned company are set to meet with bond investors ahead of its debut on international capital markets. According to Moody's, the company is in an extremely strong liquidity position, with its cash revenue set at $48.8 billion and its debt levels at $27 billion. Now, Aramco intends to issue its first US dollar-denominated bond for at least $10 billion after completing its marketing campaign this week. And to Egypt, where the government this week approved the state budget for the fiscal year to June 2020, targeting a deficit of 7.2%, GDP growth of 6.1%, and a debt-to-GDP ratio of 89%. Now, the 2019-2020 budget has been based on an exchange rate of 18 Egyptian pounds per dollar and international oil prices of about $68 per barrel. Egypt's fiscal year begins in June every year. Here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim with the details.
The government is aiming to reduce the deficit to 7.2% from a current 8.4%. The targeted economic growth in the next fiscal year is 6.1% from 5.5%. But how will this be achieved?
The priority is to cut down on expenditure, and it's clear in the budget that the plan is to scrap subsidies on fuel and electricity, which take most of the revenue, especially the 92 and 95 octane, that's highly subsidized by the government.
But where will the saved money from expenditure cuts be channeled?
First of all, to maintain national security and combat terrorism. Then comes expenditure on education and health services. It's extremely important to improve the quality of public services and social security programs for Egyptians, developing the education system in schools, and also hospitals and health insurance for the poor are high on the agenda.
Some Egyptians have voiced their opinions about the announced budget.
Let's start with improving the educational system, developing the schools and reviewing the curriculum to help students become more creative, like Norway and Europe as a whole, which doesn't exist here.
We need more subsidies and services because the population is increasing, but the funds for services are not keeping up to sustain our needs.
For most experts, the main challenge for the government is to repay the mushrooming international and local debt. The draft has been welcomed by the National Assembly, but for most of the public, they're focusing on whether the government will succeed in reducing prices and the unemployment rates to 9.3% as promised in the draft. Yas Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Now, in South Africa, strong oil prices and a weakening rand have combined to set up another massive fuel price hike that, of course, comes into effect this month. According to the Central Energy Fund, the retail price of octane petrol is set to rise to 9 cents per litre inland, while on the coast it is set to rise at about 8 cents. Now, petrol prices by litre is set at $1.13, the steepest since April 2015. With the country's revenue shortfall of more than $2.9 billion, the Treasury has now imposed levies that will fund the coffers. However, consumer price inflation has left the repo rate unchanged at 6.75%. And in Tunisia, fuel prices have increased by about 4% in an effort to rein in its budget deficit and meet its financial reforms. The price of petrol per litre is set to increase by 3.9% to 7 cents. The Tunisian government raised petrol prices 4 times in 2018. It is facing pressure from the International Monetary Fund to trim its budget deficit. The increase in fuel and electricity bills is aimed at offsetting a rise in oil prices that is putting pressure on strained public finances. Now, Tunisia has faced an economic slump since 2011 following the overthrow of its leader, Zine El Abidine Ben Ali. And a preliminary report into the fatal crash of an Ethiopian Airlines jet that killed about 157 people last month is set to be released this week. This, of course, is a key step forward towards explaining a disaster that has rocked the credibility of U.S. plane maker Boeing. Now, the crash was the second in months involving a Boeing 737 MAX 8, which triggered a worldwide grounding of the fleet. The findings are expected to identify if the aircraft's anti-stall system was faulty. The missing 737 sensor is said to be a focus of the crash probe. Preliminary reports indicate that the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, or MCAS, was pushing the plane's nose down, leading to the disaster. And China's middle class is on the rise, and a leading Chinese hotel chain named Greentree is acquiring an Australian hospitality group to meet those needs. The group has previously pioneered high-end hotels in smaller Chinese cities, and the merger aims to expand hotels across China and Asia. Here's Nathan King with more.
In the heart of New York, a Chinese success story. 2 hotel chains, Greentree and Argyle, cementing their merger at the heart of global capitalism. The new Greentree Hospitality Group will focus their attention on expansion in China and Asia, as Asia's growing middle class calls for world-class accommodations. Ahead of the merger, I caught up with Argyle founder Kevin Zhang at his offices in Beijing.
So that is our first one, and still there.
Zhang bet big on opening international standard hotels in some of the less developed provinces of China like Guizhou and Sichuan. Now those provinces are top destinations for Chinese and international travelers.
That is the best holiday destination, a new emerging holiday destination.
Absolutely.
And another thing is that 10 or 15 or 20 years ago, it is quite underdeveloped. So the GDP of last 2 years is one of the most fast-growing region.
Under the new company, Kevin will remain at the helm of Argyle, spreading further into China but also Southeast Asia and beyond. Kevin Zhang is also an ambassador for China's growth story in the region. A naturalised Australian citizen, he advises the Australian government on exports in the service sector. Zhang sees himself as an intermediary between Canberra and Beijing.
I try my best and to promote the business between Australia and China. I think I'm more, in some way, I'm the messenger to convey a kind of positive voice.
So next time you're travelling in Sichuan, Guizhou, Nepal or even Thailand, you could find yourself staying at a Greentree or Argyle hotel, a company that bet big on China's growth and is reaping the dividends. Nathan King, CGTN.
Well, that's all for now on Africa Live Biz, but coming up on Global Business Africa, widespread condemnation of the resurgence of xenophobic attacks in South Africa will bring you the latest and its impact on business in the country. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you, Beatrice.
Uche, thank you. And we still have more news, views and analysis for you here in the program. Don't go away.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes. The great So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference. There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In Senegal, a new initiative that mirrors popular social media challenges is helping to attract young people to participate in improving environmental conditions. Here's more on that.
In the suburbs of Dakar, some young people from the district of Yambul have joined together to participate in the Trash Tag Challenge. The principle behind driving social media trends is being deployed in mobilizing people to protect the environment in Senegal. They usually meet in their former schools on most mornings.
We found this challenge on the net and we told ourselves, why not do the same thing in our neighborhood? Today, we came to clean the school that has educated us, and I think that cleanliness is a key element in the development of a country. If our country is clean, we live healthy. If it is not clean, we are facing diseases.
After 2 hours of work, the team has cleaned several dirty corners of the school. They are now ready to post their trash tag pictures on the net. However, it is not meant to be just a one-time show-off. The initiative is getting support from local authorities.
The City Hall has provided cleaning equipment like brushes and shovels to support them. It will continue. We are happy to see this as an association of young boys and girls. And we believe that in the context of climate change, this initiative contributes to the fight against environmental degradation.
The teams involved meet regularly to identify a new environmental protection challenge, hoping to make a positive change in the community. Dina Matengo, CGTN.
Turning to South Africa, a cultural festival was recently held to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. Over 1,000 revelers enjoyed traditional Chinese shows, including a Lion Awakening drum performance. Let's take a look.
2019 marks the 70th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. The inaugural Shining Chinese Stars and Shining Chinese Culture Festival to celebrate the anniversary took place at the Lawrenceford Wine Estate in Cape Town. Over 1,000 spectators immersed themselves in a day of Chinese arts and crafts at a family-friendly event. Performances included the Beijing Opera, a Qipao show, and Tai Chi. As evening descended, the Chinese Huanxing Arts Group delighted the audiences with an acrobatic lion dance. Noel Mokugu, CGTN.
And your sports news coming up next. Here's what's ahead.